8 soldiers entered the stuffy room. As they lay down in the uncomfortable cots, IVs are quickly hooked up. They are alone. Within 5 minutes, numbness begins, starting in the legs, rising higher and higher until they feel like they're floating. It's a pleasant feeling until a terrible pain strikes. So terrible it makes them vomit. So agonizing that one man tries to claw his own eyes out. The other soldiers stumble out of their beds and wobble in pain to help the panicked man. Meanwhile, a nurse stands in the corner, taking notes, making no attempt to help them.
This is Edgewood Arsenal.
Edgewood Arsenal was a military facility that conducted a top-secret operation from 1948 to 1975. It was created due to tensions between the U.S. and Russia during the Cold War. The U.S. wanted to make a weapon for protection against a possible Russian attack. The goal of this operation was to make psychochemical weaponry that could incapacitate an enemy without killing them.
A New York Times 1964 newspaper article says, according to one Army spokesman, the ideal mixture would bring happily intoxicated enemy troops into our lines with their hands up humming the Star-Spangled Banner.
In 1955, with the technology available at the time, the military decided to create this ideal mixture by testing possible chemicals on U.S. soldiers.
This was done without proper consent. Tragically, volunteers weren't fully aware of what they were getting into. This made the operation classified, as the military didn't want the general public to know that they were using their own soldiers as test subjects.
The U.S. military site in Maryland was a location for various triumphs in military technology during the 1950s. Still, Edgewood Arsenal conducted tragic medical experimentation on volunteer soldiers that scarred the site for years to come.
Today, many leaders and participants regard the program and its outcomes as a triumphant success in the field of psychochemical warfare and medicine. For some, the Edgewood program played a significant role in contributing to American innovation.
Edgewood scientists created a lot of triumphant military and chemical warfare technology. They invented a machine that beeps if chemical nerve agents are in the air, as well as developed new and improved gas masks to further individual protection.
Gas-protecting clothes were also made for soldiers fighting in combat. Scientists also researched and developed medical treatments for those exposed to certain nerve agents, as well as invented artificial respiratory technology. Throughout the Cold War era, Edgewood is said to have contributed over 300 triumphant discoveries, studies, and technology to chemical core research in the Army Chemical Center.
Unfortunately, to learn about the effects of these agents, the military had to test their own soldiers.
According to a decorated Edgewood veteran, Eric Muth, exposure to toxic chemicals was painful.
Burning sensations, stinging of the skin and eyes, retching. One time we had this thing called DM, and it was an arsenic, and you couldn't help but puke,
After his experience with Edgewood, he settled down locally in Milford, Connecticut with his family, where he worked as an optometrist until 2002, and to this day is greatly devoted to his town.
A Milford Mirror article says his list of community services goes on and on.
He continued to help Connecticut until he started feeling the devastating effects of the experiments he was put through.
It tragically impacted his health in the years to come.
Some problems. I'm a 100% disabled veteran, and so yeah, it did affect my health.
Edgewood had tragic components from the start. Soldiers are immediately misinformed when just signing up to volunteer. Eric Muth confirms this.
We did not have informed consent, no.
Even on this recruitment poster, the operation claims to be looking for medical research volunteers. There is no mention of chemicals or gases being used.
Edgewood appeared to be an attractive military job for those who weren't interested in active combat. Muth signed up and unknowingly subjected himself to human experimentation twice because of this.
I volunteered a second time, but that time things went a little askew. I had drugs, and they did not tell us about that.
Later, Muth found out he was exposed to THC, a form of marijuana that is 50 times the strength of the average street drug.
I had it continuously for 3 days, and I was in and out of consciousness during all that time.
Muth also experienced many overwhelming hallucinations.
Over my own body, which was like an operating room or a gurney, and there were white coat guys all around me, obviously doctors, and behind them was a group of officers observing what was going on and what my reactions were to things.
Day after day, Muth was put through these tests in the form of shots or where he was put in rooms filled with toxic gas. Soldiers were sometimes given gas masks for protection.
Mind-boggling, because you think, well, this mask was protecting me, but it wasn't at all, and before you know it, you're on the floor.
It was unknown if these inventions actually protected one when exposed. 7,000 other soldiers were used as human guinea pigs to find out.
Years after Muth was released from Edgewood, he started to feel the tragic effects of exposure and applied to be a Veterans Association disabled veteran. He and other Edgewood volunteers were rejected to get full VA health coverage because the experiments were classified. However, the top secret operation made it difficult to prove that he ever underwent any military experimentation to lead to these effects.
I got 50%, but it took like almost 10 years to get to the 100% disability. Prove it, you know?
Yeah.
And you can't prove something if you don't have the adequate records to prove it.
Edgewood participants took a vow of secrecy, so they were forbidden to talk to anybody about what took place at Edgewood, including their doctors.
This not only made it impossible to prove that the Edgewood human experiments actually happened, but it was detrimental to their health. Their doctors were ill-equipped to treat them, as they did not have their truthful medical history.
This also made it difficult to receive VA disablement accountabilities, an important requirement in acquiring healthcare from the Veterans Association.
Many soldiers passed as a result of this ill consideration. If the oath had been lifted earlier, they could have gotten the proper health care they needed to survive. Instead, thousands have passed without even proof that they were ever harmed by the military.
Ray Forrest was unfortunately one of those soldiers. He visited an abundance of VA medical centers for health problems clearly related to Edgewood.
His wife, Catherine Forrest, told CNN, "I have seen animals at shelters get better care than Forrest received from the VA."
These soldiers suffered tragically within Edgewood and have been bearing the life-wrenching effects since.
The veterans sued the VA to publicize their Edgewood testing story and sever the vow of secrecy because their health was depleting.
Edgewood veterans spent years trying to find a lawyer courageous enough to take their case. By the end of the trial in 2009, it was a triumphant victory.
Now, participants, their doctors, and the world would know the chemical agents they were exposed to.
After the win, the lifted contract helped the ex-soldiers become 100% VA disabled with full healthcare coverage.
The lawsuit not only gave the past Edgewood volunteers more freedom and opportunity, but it brought awareness to what tragically took place nearly 50 years ago. After all, Muth, and along with many participants, didn't want to be lost in history.
I don't want to be forgotten, you know.
Today, the Edgewood facility commemorates the veterans by becoming a center of excellence.
After being rebranded and reconstructed several times, it now is connected to the Aberdeen Proving Ground, or APG, and is now known specifically as Aberdeen South.
The core purpose and mission of the facility remains the same.
According to APG's Public Affairs, the many reorganizations and name changes since 1917 did not change the primary mission of the various organizations located in APG South to provide the best chemical and biological defense equipment, supplies, and procedures.
Although the military still looks for the best chemical and biological equipment, it doesn't experiment on humans today. The APG Deputy Chief of Public Affairs and U.S. Army Communications Electronics Commander Gregory Mahal confirms this statement.
Yeah, we don't experiment with the people, no.
Even past participants like Eric Muth believe nothing of this sort could happen in this modern day.
I think that the time is right, and that America is at that stage where we would do that again.
Instead of testing, Aberdeen South, as well as APG overall, has become more focused on training and preparing for all types of warfare at the ground. According to Major General Randy Taylor, the president of APG, if a soldier uses a piece of technology for protection, intelligence, to shoot, to move, or communicate, chances are that it was developed, tested, and fielded by an APG organization.
Soldiers aren't the only ones benefiting from the abundance of triumphant breakthroughs, discoveries, and inventions created at APG.
A lot of innovation from the Army that gets developed here makes its way out into the public sector, from Kevlar vests for police to Gore-Tex and clothing improvements that make things lighter and better in terms of keeping you warm during swimming or keeping you warm during hunting or skiing, for that matter. We got a whole vehicle line called the Jeep that has made its way, and the Hummer has made its way off of the military proving grounds and into the private sector. Walkie-talkies, which of course now lead to cell phones.
APG South, the new Edgewood Arsenal, has shifted its efforts from tragically finding a way to combat biological and chemical warfare to creating and releasing inventions, all of which have triumphantly benefited not only the military, but the public today.